Welcome to the Soccer Geeks podcast, hosted by Jason Barbato.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Soccer Geeks podcast. I'm your host, Jason Barbato, along with our executive producer, Marissa Cowley. We'd love to welcome you to the podcast today. We have a really good show lined up. We hope you have a great time. Marissa, what do we have for us today?
Today we have Andrew Hosmar. I mean, I guess we'll ask. It's weird because
pronunciation.
You meet people virtually, right? And you don't get that traditional handshake. But he is with the New England Revolution. He's the Business Intelligence Supervisor. So we're gonna be chatting with him in just a little bit. But if you are watching, thank you for watching and supporting Soccer Geeks mission. And we really are excited for this conversation today. So I'll bring him in. Hey, Andrew.
Andrew, welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing?
Living the dream, guys. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, here at the Soccer Geeks podcast, we want to invite you to live the game. So hopefully for the next 30, 40 minutes, we'll invite you just to kind of go down memory lane a little bit and kind of share a little bit about your past experience, your current experience, and kind of what you're hoping for in the future around the game of soccer. But we'd just like to welcome you. And we're looking forward to being able to spend some time with you today.
Always happy to participate in the conversation.
Sounds good, buddy.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, I'll let you guys get to your conversation, and I'll be back towards the end.
Thank you, a wonderful Wizard of Oz. Go back behind the curtain. Yeah. Thanks, Marissa. Hey, Andrew. So what I want to be able to get into today is, we'd love to be able to give our audience kind of a sense of your level of engagement of the game, over the course of your life. And not only your life, growing up, but also engaging it from a career aspect, and then looking down the future of what are some of the effective changes that you'd love to be able to see enacted in the game on your watch, so to speak. And so starting this out, would you please just kind of share a little bit about where you grew up playing soccer, kind of what levels you played at here domestically in the U.S.?
Yeah, of course. So I was lucky enough to be raised in Scottsdale, Arizona, and that meant we could play year round. So I never had to have a winter break by any means. Played on various AYSO teams from recreational to competitive up until I want to say the last time I was playing in a club atmosphere was around when I entered fifth grade, just starting middle school. From then on, I was a part of a small schools division in the state of Arizona. So my school didn't have a football team. Football typically is the fall sport. Soccer was then moved to fall. And that I had to make a choice pretty early on because of the state rules, you cannot play both club and high school at the same time. So I picked, mostly because of a strong nucleus of friends and connections I had within my schools, I picked to play for my school through freshman year, through senior year in high school on varsity, and had tried many times to kind of see if there's any way around that rule to get onto a club team, but schedules and whatnot conflicted, and so that wasn't there. But was fortunate enough my senior year to get connected with a trainer through a friend who I originally actually did not connect with at all. And he was one who was very unorthodox, and growing up playing in AYSO system, practices are always very structured. There was always an understanding of an end goal to whatever you were doing. When I came into train with, his name's Meyer. When I came in to train with Meyer, there was seemingly no idea what was going on. It was just kind of throwing cones around, telling me to dribble, do random moves and whatnot. And I knew that if my goal was to play at the NCAA level, I thought, well, I've done things one way my whole life. I might as well try to do it differently to see if I could shake things up. Had no offers, just knew I wanted to play. So bought into the system and quickly developed a great relationship with him, and was able to fall in love with the process and the grind of day-to-day training sessions, oftentimes twice a day. And unfortunately, it was a little too late. And when I got to Claremont McKenna, which is a small Division III school outside of Los Angeles, that I was not afforded the opportunity to play at the NCAA level. So I was given a choice, and I pivoted. And as a multi-sport athlete in high school, soccer, basketball, and baseball, I knew I wanted to compete at some. Being an athlete, and especially in the academic sphere, had always been a part of my identity. So I knew I wanted to compete for something. And if I wasn't going to have that opportunity in soccer, it was going to be something else. Somehow I thought, oh, let me just email the football coach, because I've never played football before in my life. And one of my buddies happened to be transferring, and he was the kicker on the football team. And well, sure enough, I was pretty good at kicking. So, tried out, made the football team, and ended up spending about 2.5 years. We won the conference championship in 2018 for the first time since the late 80s. I think it was 30 years almost. And having the opportunity to kind of expand and use the most of my athleticism that I had left. Now, I didn't make it to my senior year. I had a lingering knee injury from high school that put off surgery, and decided to, when I got to my junior year and wasn't playing at all, I knew it was time for me to kind of make a decision that was going to be best for my long-term health. And then was able to kind of stick with a lot of the connections I had made in the athletic sphere by going into the broadcast booth. So I was the color commentator for the football broadcasts, as well as doing play-by-play for men's and women's basketball, lacrosse, baseball, whatever it is. So kind of, I think the larger theme there is doing whatever I could to connect myself, to continue to grow and expand my network, because I knew I wasn't going to follow kind of a traditional career path. And obviously, once that playing component was taken out of the equation, then I was forced to make a decision. And that's kind of another common theme, is we're going to be approached by many complex and difficult choices. And, whatever that choice ends up being, it's been difficult in the short term to see what the long-term benefit's going to be. And obviously being 23 and being just not even 2 years out of my undergrad, there's still, so much that has to be found. But that'll give you a pretty good idea of,
no, it does. It really gives a really good kind of bookend idea of like your playing career, so to speak, your interaction with the game. And it seems that there, from what you shared, there was a couple different kind of forks in the road where decisions had to be made. I know that on one end, that rule, that kind of kept you from playing high school and playing on a competitive team has most recently been overturned, so to speak, or changed, or at least it has here in California. I know ECNL rules have changed across the nation, I think. And so what a tough decision to ask kids to make, whether to not play on their high school team or to play in ECNL, although I can genuinely see both sides of that argument. How did that, obviously you felt that kind of really affected your options. And we talked about, development and finally getting into like that place where it seemed like once you actually got to college and really wanted to push, that's when you really wanted to get really serious about your playing career. But it was really too late for you, unless you're the latest bloomer ever in the history of soccer. But it was really too late at that point. Looking back, going down to like kind of your younger years and thinking of playing as you were coming up, do you think that there were other opportunities for that to have been different? Or, or were you just in a different state of mind as a player growing up where you're like, yeah, I'm doing this. I'm here with my friends. This is the most important thing, is the social component of it and having a good time playing the game. Do you think that there's something that kind of held you back from having that conversation about your dreams and your ambitions with the game earlier?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I don't necessarily want to frame it as a regret or something that I feel, well, let's be honest. Looking back now, I understand I didn't put in the work in the necessary time to get to where I wanted to be. And when I first entered high school and I had to make a choice of, having the opportunity to go to a school where I can play 3 different sports and be an active contributor in all 3 versus foregoing that and a lot of those relationships that came with it and being very serious about the sport of soccer. Statistically speaking, I was actually a much better baseball player than I was soccer.
All
But
right,
I
fair enough.
think part of that was because I didn't place such high expectations on myself playing baseball than playing soccer, because when I entered freshman year in high school, the thought kind of started to go into my head of I want to play past high school and potentially even pro. And I didn't take the steps necessary to prepare myself. Now also, I was in a family that prioritized academics, and I was also in a family where nobody had ever been a college athlete before, and very few had even played in high school. So there was a lot of unknown around that.
Yeah, not a lot of context.
Yeah, and can't blame anybody about that. My parents still gave me all the opportunities, and it was up to me to take advantage of that.
Sure.
But the one thing that I do look back on is a lot of those times that I had fun in high school and even college playing a sport that I had never played before and getting to win a championship was just doing something different and not being quote unquote pigeonholed into, one specific path starting from a young age. Mm-hmm. The ability to play football at the NCAA level showed me, one, because I was terrified the whole time. I had no idea what I was doing. It was something that I knew at the time I had to do because, one, you're only in college once, and I didn't want to be spending more than 4 years in college. The second part being, given my knee and I had to have surgery my junior year and other issues, I knew I only had so much time to play at a high competitive level. And it came down to those connections and just being in that team environment and competing for one common goal. Again, I love the sport of soccer more than anything. And I want to continue to give myself to the game. But also what's incredibly important, and which I think is a common theme amongst a lot of athletes, is the competitive nature and just getting to a point where you can compete and win for something. So those two components, I think, almost even it out. And that, I didn't get to play soccer, but I did get to do something that I never would have imagined myself doing.
Sure.
And we had success at it too.
Yeah. So you got to play a game that you grew up and you loved it, and it afforded you other opportunities. It so happened it was in the short term, right, in another sport where you got to kind of experience a different level of success, right? A different level of achievement than you had before. But kind of that talk me through a little bit of that post-collegiate move there for you, playing American football, and then kind of going into really wanting to go and getting involved back into soccer. As I understand, as you've shared with me in the past before, you kind of had a certain level of skill set in the classroom that you felt would be very valuable in the soccer realm. So can you kind of, briefly kind of talk about that pivot where you kind of saw those skills and what kind of really piqued your interest and kind of where you started running with that?
Yeah, I'll go back to, 2012 or 2013. If you had, gone on TV on a Saturday, it might be one Premier League match on TV in the US, and MLS was maybe once a week as well. So there wasn't too much exposure to the professional game. My uncle, so a lot of my family is from the Pacific Northwest, in Portland. And I had, when was I? We were there.
Let me cover some of these scarves in the back for you. You're going to be all right. Yeah.
The first game I ever attended was Portland Timbers match, sitting in the Timbers Army. And that right then and there was right before I was getting into high school. That was what sold me. I didn't know people were this passionate about the sport of soccer in the US.
Yeah. Yeah.
You grow up and maybe one kid at school's got a David Beckham LA Galaxy kit, but other than that, there wasn't too much exposure to that.
Right.
So seeing the passion there first kind of put the thought in my mind of like, okay, this is something that I can kind of get into. And then all the opportunities that I had to, whether it was going to the Desert Diamond Cup, which was down in Tucson, and Portland happened to be one of the teams that was there, going, hanging out, getting to meet the players, the coaching staff, just made it a little bit more real. And it wasn't so much of, growing up, going to a Suns game and watching, Steve Nash. It's like, that is so much more distant of a possibility than, when you actually meet these people and it becomes a little bit more of a reality.
Yeah. The access. Yeah.
Exactly. So go through high school, try to convince my friends to watch MLS. It was an uphill battle, but
Sure.
Getting to college, and when I first kind of found out that playing at the varsity level wasn't going to be in the writing for me, I had made a friend, and we both were like, well, how can we give opportunities to kids like us who weren't at that level but still wanted to play competitively? So when I first started to venture into sort of that more operational backroom type of space, we had actually started our own amateur club, did all the fundraising, all the anything from, fields, negotiating with the league, ref fees, anything, you name it, we did it. And I was actually playing on that team while also playing football, while also running the team. And the story. I mean, I was dead tired, and I didn't, I don't think I could ever do that again. But it was so worth it because it allowed me, as you had mentioned, to kind of understand that my impact on the game can be made off the field.
Yeah.
And
That's a huge realization too.
And
yeah.
I still, believe me, it's not, I would still love to be playing, and it kills me every time. And, but that allowed me to then, okay, what can I look for in a professional sphere that can allow me to continue to kind of expand my skill set? Because I was at a liberal arts school, I was studying economics. That can mean a lot of things, but I wanted to focus more in the finance and statistical realm because I've always been a numbers guy. I hated English class in high school. Anyways, then freshman summer, just thought, hey, why not? Sent off an application to the Portland Timbers, and totally forgot I even applied. Ended up getting offered a job as a coach for their youth program. So moved out to Portland, stayed with my aunt and uncle, lived in the basement, and ran camps for, I think it was ages like 5 to 13 for kids for the whole summer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Beginning the coaching licensing process, I thought, okay, well, if I can't play, maybe I can coach.
Yeah.
That summer, writing essentially a State of the Union on the U.S. Soccer Federation, player development, and what happened in 2014 World Cup and what we need to do to prepare for 2018. Obviously, we know what happened in 2018.
We needed to prepare better, Andrew. That's the conclusion of the paper. We needed to prepare better. Yeah.
Essentially.
Sure.
That was the conclusion.
Yeah.
And so again, there's taking whatever opportunity I could to learn and grow within the game. Junior year comes around, my career is over in knee surgery, kind of just down, trying to figure out, like, comprehend the fact that, I'm no longer competing at a level of where I want to compete at. One of my roommates at the time, who was on the baseball team, he had gotten an email from an alumni who worked at this company, was looking to hire interns from Claremont. But the one area that they hadn't ventured into was Major League Soccer. And I was like, well, hey, I happen to know some people there. And I was working in marketing at the time for that company. And I just so happened to be sitting next to the head of institutional sales in the office, and just started to begin to pick up things from him and gather sort of more or less his sales pitch and try to better understand how we can sell the product. And then more so, it was just out of my own ambition or whatever it was, just asked and said, "Hey, can I start selling?" And they said, "Sure, go ahead." And so I had begun to reach out to all my contacts in, Portland, Toronto, San Jose, wherever it was, and had then subsequently set up meetings. And in conclusion of my internship with that company, had gone on a 2,000-mile road trip down the West Coast selling product to MLS teams on the West Coast. That was kind of an important point, more or less, because it taught me, one, just don't be afraid to ask. Like, it can't hurt. And that gave me something, concrete on my resume that I don't think a lot of other people have had that opportunity to actually see a full sales cycle, and actually be spearheading that opportunity. And it also continued to build my name and my reputation in MLS, doing something radically different, which is, nobody from Claremont goes to work in professional sports. Everybody follows the traditional path. Everybody in my family had followed the traditional path.
And even the traditional path of what you thought it might look to get into professional sports is still very unorthodox, right? So what I think is really neat is that, and what can be really encouraging to the audience, especially kids that are players, that are younger now, whether they're boys or girls, right, is that, you wanted to intern with the Portland Timbers. They gave you an opportunity. You wanted to have a summer job with the Phoenix Rising. Hey, they had an opportunity that's there. The beautiful thing in our country now is that we're coming pretty close to, I think, 100 or nearly 100 professional soccer organizations in the country, like genuinely like professional ones. Plus, there's a lot of that are semi-pro. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of come up in the ranks. I know that, your title, at the Revs, the New England Revolution, it's Business Intelligence Supervisor, which I've intentionally tried to make sure I don't say British Intelligence Officer every time. But, that's kind of where the land or the role you've kind of landed in now. And you kind of just were getting on the cusp of that conversation of like trying to get into the professional aspect. But you used kind of some of the things that you really resonated with you about the sport as not only some of the experience you had, but also some of that economic background too, of just trying of using that plus data analytics to get your foot in the door. Can you kind of speak to where you thought that was of high value to a professional sports organization?
It was difficult because you're starting your career and you want to take those opportunities when they come. But you also, I think, and something that I was taught was you can actually be picky. You don't have to take anything that comes at you. And knowing that gave me the patience to wait until, I was contacted by the Revs about this position. Mm-hmm. And I had emailed the president of the club, Brian Bolello, my resume. And I just said, it was quick shooter. Hey, my name's Andrew. This is what I've done. This is what I can do for you. Forwarded the email to the guy who hired me, interviewed me twice in 24 hours, and received the offer. Yeah. And I knew, one, when that happened, that when they see something that they like, they're going to act on it. And that gave me the confidence to know that, two, I was going to go into something and build it from the ground up. Business intelligence as a concept has been around traditional industry for a while, but the concept of using data to inform decisions is still relatively new in the sport of soccer. So
and what does that even mean? Using data to inform decisions. I mean, what type of data are we talking about? Because on the business, there's the business side, right? And then there's the sporting side. So talking specifically to like the business side, what type of, without obviously divulging any club secrets or anything like that, or algorithms that you guys are doing or formulas, but like, what does that even entail? Like, are we talking, the demographics of people that are spending, $25 to $100 at a game? What are we talking about?
Yeah. And you kind of hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Now we have gone very quickly from having almost little to no data on customers to having way more data than we
Like
really know what
Zuckerberg
to do.
level data, or like what are we talking about?
I
Yeah,
mean, it's yeah, without sharing too much, it's
sure.
and for context too, and I want to share my introduction. Actually, I started off on the technical side. I was working with Nashville last winter with their scouting department,
Yeah,
helping them build out their South American recruiting strategy. That was my entrance into, okay, well, now I know that there's data involved in the game. Okay. So fast forward to my job with the Revs. The main question is, how can we, one, modernize, and two, open up leave no stone unturned. So that, for instance, if you purchase a single ticket to a Revs game, and we can gather information that can help us funnel you through to specific marketing strategy, specific
sure.
campaigns, specific ways to segment customers in a way to that we can maximize the potential. At the end of the day, these clubs want to make money. And
Sure.
so how can we maximize those opportunities? In terms of specific data, we actually just had a conversation about our communications and how does a season member receive different treatment than a multi-game buyer or a single game purchaser. How does somebody um, how do we convert those individuals, and then also how do we uh, create opportunities out of nothing?
Right.
And having you know having a successful team, being in a market like Boston, which is one of the historically greatest sports markets in the country, and having a city that thrives off of success. When that success comes on the field, a lot of those results come in accordingly.
Yeah.
But it's business intelligence is everything and it's nothing at the same time. It's marketing and sales, but it's also data analytics.
Right.
It's operations, and it's almost even HR. So there's so much that falls under that umbrella, and that was part of what drew me to this. Was this opportunity is going to allow me to build a department from scratch, and it's going to allow me to work with people who have been in the industry for a long time, and will allow me to be exposed to as much knowledge as I can gain in my time here.
Do you feel that, because it's one thing to talk about big data and data gathering, obviously, if you're trying to maximize revenue for the club, which, hey, I understand, people think that it's this lucrative business that you guys are just printing money, working for a sports team. But the reality is that there's some pretty tight margins, especially in the sport of soccer in this country. There genuinely is. At what point what do you think it's going to take for professional clubs in this country to look at and use data like we've been discussing? Like you said, like there isn't really a data department on the business side. At what point does it actually flip then to the sporting side, where professional organizations are going to really hone in on gathering data, and see that player development and player pathways, kind of some of the frustrations that you had even growing up. What do you think it's going to take to kind of turn the tide for front offices to really look at big data as a solution to revenue generation?
I think we're beginning to see that transition right now. We have some clubs in this country that are a little bit of a slow adopter when it comes to using data, whether it's performance data to help on field decisions or data to help business decisions. There are also some of the clubs in the country who are year in, year out, have not really seen much success on the field, but their business operations are top notch. So we're still in this fledgling stage of kind of figuring things out. And what's great is that the league has allowed clubs, obviously being a single entity, these clubs, we are given the opportunity to collaborate, share best practices with others to make sure that we are, because MLS revenue is MLS revenue from top bottom. So they want every club to have success. They're not going to ride the LAs and who else and leave Minnesota in the dust. That's not going to happen. So but I will say,
which is healthy. I mean, they really promote parity in all things. I mean, I got to plug back in my light here, but they promote parity in all things: parity in the league, parity in the playoffs, parity in even revenue generation. Large in part, they'd like to be able to promote parity in player development, but we know that's not necessarily true, right? Minnesota doesn't even have an academy at this stage. They've basically exited the market on even having an academy, which is incredibly offensive in my opinion. But it's good that they see the value there, right? The value is there. So let me ask you this question, and we got about 5 or 7 more minutes, like before we want to wrap up the conversation here. What do you think it's going to take? You know, you've been around the landscape. You're in a front office. I mean, obviously, you know, you're building your department as it is, and you've got a pathway that you'd like to head down, and a ladder that you'd like to climb professionally as you give back to the game. What do you think it's going to take for the example we're talking about right now? On the data side, what do you think it's going to take a club like Minnesota United to have an academy again and start investing, you know, in-house, things like that, you know, for the new clubs that are being formed, or even some of the old guard, the New England Revolutions of the world, right, that don't have even their own private stadium and things like that? What is it going to take to help kind of tip those scales?
I think there's going to be some new potential revenue that's going to be unlocked, and one you hit on, soccer specific stadiums. Being able to have control over gate revenue is incredibly important. Now also, you've got the Atlantas and the Seattles of the world that have no problem selling out football stadiums. I don't think those will ever 100% leave, but I do think a move towards that will be important. So unlocking other revenue streams, I think, is going to be important when we revisit the broadcast negotiations in 2023.
That's going to be huge.
Will unlock even more.
Huge, yeah, because the Premier League just got done with theirs, and the number from that is absolutely astronomical.
Billions.
That's gonna really help that league continue to get pay for and afford the biggest players around the world. So
now that we have, so there's gate, there's TV. MLS Next, I think, is going to, given the structure of Major League Soccer, clubs will quickly realize, those who are not participating will quickly realize, and I think the league is going to move towards hopefully a 100% participation.
Right.
Those clubs who are not participating and creating a viable pathway to pro from youth will see where they're lacking. There's going to be the Dallases and the Philadelphias that are just going to turn out young players.
Yep. They invest heavy in academies. They for years have not spent big money on DPs. They for years have really invested. I mean, everyone loves it when they're selling, 10 players, for excess of $3 to $15 million a pop, right? But no one was really willing the 7, 8, 9 years ago to invest the money in the academies like Philadelphia and Dallas were. Who do you feel are the clubs that are kind of right there in tier 2? Like if you were to limit tier 2 to maybe 2 to 3 teams, who would you say are right there that are investing in the academy, investing in data, doing what they can to have homegrown players and to develop and to sell, or to develop and keep? Who are those teams?
there's two clubs this year that we saw that were their hand was forced and they had to play a lot of young players earlier than they wanted to. Seattle being number one,
Yep.
I believe. However many,
Yep.
they had 6 teenagers. They started that one game or something.
They did. They had
they won.
six players start under the age of 18 years old.
Yeah,
huge. Yeah.
Colorado, we've seen momentum with them, and Cole Bassett.
0 DPs on Colorado. 0 designated players.
Sammy Vines to Europe, and Cole Bassett soon as well.
And maybe Kellen Acosta as well.
Yes. But in terms of pure homegrowns, I mean, we've seen some pop up here and there. I mean, Kevin Paredes in DC United.
Yep. Big talent. Big talent.
Efra Alvarez, Julian Araujo in the Galaxy. But I think so many clubs are still even building out that infrastructure to where we won't quite see, a lot of that development. We look at a couple of years ago, Marco Farfan was the poster child for the Portland Timbers Academy. He was the only one that ever made it out,
Correct.
And not even excluding those who had made it to either USL or other levels or NISA.
Right.
So, but I think the key thing, and what obviously kind of the crux of this conversation is opportunity. And until we begin to allow for there to be ample opportunity for those, even outside of the MLS Academy system and outside of the outside of directly US Soccer Federation academies, a lot of these problems will continue to be around for a while.
Yeah. For a while there, even for Portland, is Ibo Bise for quite a while, right? But, unfortunately, the last few years have been a little bit unfortunate as far as his development career and things like that. But, and we're going to have that. We're going to have the next big thing. We're going to have the hype. And then, guys are going to kind of settle into their career and, or is what it is. And, but the good thing is that people are at least kicking down doors, trying. And that's really what it is. Looking back through, like you said, looking through your career playing the game and your interaction with it. And one thing I really value and appreciate is that, hey, I didn't have these opportunities, or I didn't have that conversation or that thought young enough. And when I did, it was too late. What type of environment could I create for players down the road to have that conversation earlier, to have that conversation sooner? And that's why I appreciate and applaud like your efforts, and right now, you're on the biz dev side, for a professional club, but that doesn't mean that down the road that the lessons you're learning today are not going to be able to help a professional club on the other side. Wrapping us up here, I got one last question for you. And I just want to ask, if there was one thing in soccer, and I'm going to call it soccer on this show, it's called Soccer Geeks. I'm going to call it that here. It's fine if you call it football, but we call it soccer. If there's if you could wave a wand and you could change one thing about the game in the United States, what would that be, and how would that make the game better here?
Youth coaching, I think.
Okay.
Giving kids the freedom to play freely at a young age, and then slowly layering in structure as they begin to grow and their understanding of the game grows, will allow us, I think, to create less of a kind of results-driven win or loss mentality and more of an understanding and a passion and a love for the game.
Yeah, what a great answer. How do you think that's going to make the game better?
We know the best players in the world and where they come from. The reason they're the best players of the world and they attract the most eyes is because of their attractive style of play. The league and most world soccer is transitioning to focus and to praise strong attacking players. We can see that by the astronomical transfer fees.
Sure.
So that's where the league is headed. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't try to jump on that train.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think it's definitely is with kids. We can't forget the coaches who have to lead those kids and raise that soccer IQ and also give them the ability to dream big. Andrew, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I applaud all your efforts of what you're doing day in and day out to try to make the game better than you found it. And so thanks so much for being on the show with us today. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me.
Any final wrap-up thoughts there, Marissa, from our conversation with Andrew today?
I think one learning from Andrew, obviously, like how his path, kind of had to take the pivot. I think it's really important to hear that, and whoever's listening, he still was able to make an impact, and he is making an impact in the game. And so I think that's really important to talk about, because it's not just, you're not always going to take the path that the next biggest number one striker that everyone wants to right away. So that was a good thing to hear. And then also how we can change the game for the future, I think was great.
I love that answer. Wasn't that great? Yeah. If we could just give coaches more tools, which is what we want to do at Soccer Geeks. We want to be able to provide and give more tools and have be a big hub for the best. Like you said, one of the things I really appreciated, he talked about MLS and best practices. And I experienced this when I was involved in a USL organization as well. They wanted to share who was knocking it out of the ballpark. And that wasn't like secret information that only they got to use. They wanted all of the league to do it, because if everybody gets better, the whole game gets better. And I think that's what we have to do to change this tribalistic mentality in youth soccer in this country, is that just because if you succeed, it doesn't have to be at my detriment. And like, I can succeed too, and the whole game gets better.
That does apply to other aspects in different industries, like Andrew talked about, like how things, in traditional industries, maybe not sports industry, have always done this. They have all of this information. So why can't we do the same in a sports industry? Just because it's sports, it doesn't always have to be, like that. So yeah, it was really good conversation. So if you are watching this, listening to this, definitely give us a like, a follow. Wherever you are, we will be having this on all the podcast platforms, and you can visit our website if you are interested in learning more about us at soccergeeks.com. Any last words, Jason?
Yeah, just want to thank everybody for joining the show. Want to invite everybody, day in and day out, live the game. Thanks for joining the Soccer Geeks podcast, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.